at Connexus seek to unlock access to knowledge, networks, and visibility for women-led businesses.
Leadership, self-leadership, and I'm thinking about the imperative that we have to lead other women.
So to me, lead her is leading self. So how do we become leaders of our own lives? And how do we really shift this paradigm associated with the word leader to not be masculine, but to be really more gender neutral and more inclusive?
Leadership does not have to adhere to a stereotypically masculine template, whether that means aggression, whether that means prioritizing, self over everything else. Whether that means the, post rankings or, the typical masculine template of leadership in organizations.
Welcome to the Lead Her Roundtable. I'm Aparna Tripathi, Brand and Marketing Manager at Connexus Global. Today, I'm joined by an esteemed panel of experts who will uncover facts and share inspiration about our topic for today, the power of women supporting women in professional development. Our first speaker is Devpriya Khanna. Devpriya is the founder and CEO of Connexus Global. Devpriya's wealth of experience is spanning over 18 years in the corporate realm, uniquely positions her to lead this discussion. From her beginning as the management trainee at one of the world's largest FMCG firms to her tenure as marketing director at a global alcobev company, her journey resonates with aspiring professionals. Now, as an entrepreneur, DEIB advocate, and internationally acclaimed executive brand strategist, he is committed to amplifying the visibility of women executives and entrepreneurs while fostering inclusivity within organizations. At Connexus, she drives forward the convergence of gender diversity, economic support, and entrepreneurship, shaping a more equitable global future for all. Our next speaker is Nirupama Subramaniam. Nirupama is the co-founder and managing partner, growing leadership of women. She's a consultant, facilitator, and coach in the area of leadership development with over 25 years of work experience. She is committed to helping people discover their potential and lead their lives with passion and purpose. She is guided by the belief that greater self-awareness along with capability enhancement can help people and organizations create a significant positive impact. We have Elaine Gold with us. Elaine is a female founder, growth coach, and global strategist with a vast network. A seasoned professional with over 35 years of experience in empowering both corporates and individuals on their path to success. Having spent 8 years living and working in Qatar and contributing to global entrepreneurship network for over 12 years, Elaine brings forth a wealth of global experience and a vast network. Over the past 15 years, Elaine has dedicated herself to working on intricate international projects, operating at both the organizational strategic level and providing individual leadership coaching. And then we have Aparna Vedpuri Singh, my namesake. Aparna is the founder and CEO of Women's Web. She is a visionary leader dedicated to reshaping the narrative of women's representation and fostering fairer workplaces. Inspired by the wisdom of history's long arc, she founded Women's Web to amplify diverse voices and experiences. Aparna advocates for inclusive cultures, challenging stereotypes, and championing empathy and equity in every endeavor. Her mission? To create a future where every individual thrives, both at work and beyond. With this, I hand over to our founder, Devpriya Khanna, to take the discussions forward.
Thank you so much, Aparna, for that very generous introduction. And welcome to our amazing speakers and to our audience. Conversations at the Lead Her Roundtable are immensely important for us as our organization, Connexus, is dedicated to fostering the growth of women-led businesses and careers globally. Operating at the intersection of gender diversity and economic advancement, we at Connexus seek to unlock access to knowledge, networks, and visibility for women-led businesses. Today's roundtable revolves around the crucial topic of the power of women supporting women in professional development. where we hope to explore insightful stories, strategies, and insights that foster collaboration and growth. It's also noteworthy to mention that we're one of the few platforms that are bringing together leadership voices from both India and the UK on a topic as important and relevant as gender diversity at a global level. And with that, I open the panel. And before I start asking my questions, and before we get into this conversation, I just want to narrate a recent experience that I had. And I attended an event, a book launch recently. And, one of the speakers on the panel mentioned that women are women's worst enemies. And there were a lot of murmurs around the room. And, I could hear a lot of people resonating, a lot of women in the room resonating with that. And so to me, it was that no, that hasn't been my experience at all, because I've been extremely fortunate to have met amazing, incredible women, powerful women along the way, both in my corporate life and in my entrepreneurial life. And we've opened doors for one another, and we've helped the doors open for one another and ushered each other in holding hands. So if you just take the ladies around this table, for instance, if you look at everyone that we have around the round table, Elaine, since I met you in London, it's been just amazing. I think we met online, and then I met you in London, and since then we've just struck up a chord, and whenever we can, we support each other's initiatives, including the joint accelerator that we are going to be discussing tomorrow. And Elaine has been part of our advisory council at Connexus. She's an integral part of our mentor board. So we've come together as women supporting one another. And Nirupama, I remember when I met you at a friend's birthday party years ago, and we got talking about what we do, personal branding, and how we're helping women as an audience. And since then, at all the events that we've met, we've had something to add to one another's discussions. And here we are collectively, together at this round table. And Aparna, of course, I think our journey goes back to 2015, when I spoke at your first Breaking Barriers event of Women's Web. And since then, I think I've been at almost all of your events, and we've done some podcasts together and all. So honestly, I feel that there is a lot to be said, and there are many such examples. So there's a lot to be said about this topic, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to address this as a topic on one of our roundtables, because I really want to explode the myth that women don't support women. Today, we will talk about how women are supporting women in their professional growth. I lead an all-women's team, and I feel that when you, and I know, Aparna, you have a substantial women's presence on your teams. So I know that, even helping women create, create economic independence is a manner of support. So really looking forward to this conversation, looking forward to what we are going to add, and I'm really looking forward to hearing your perspectives around the table. And so with that, and before we dive into the topic, I'm curious. I just want to ask all three of you, when you hear the word lead her, or when you heard it for the first time, what came up for you? So Nirupama, I think I'll start with you. What does lead her mean to you?
Thank you, Devpriya. Absolute pleasure to be here. So I do a lot of work in leadership development as well as gender and diversity and inclusion. And I'll share, before I answer that question, an interesting research that I came across a few years ago said that when you look at the qualities of a leader, a typical leader, there is a 70% overlap with qualities used to describe men and only 30% with qualities used to describe women. So traditionally, we've not seen women as leaders. So when you say leader, the first thought to me is women are leaders, and we are having a leadership identity. We need to recognize that ourselves first before the world does. So to me, lead her is leading self. So how do we become leaders of our own lives? And how do we really shift this paradigm associated with the word leader to not be masculine, but to be really more gender neutral and more inclusive? So that's what lead her means to me. And it sounds very much like leader, but I like the emphasis on the her part of it.
Thank you. Thank you. I love what you said. Aparna, your insights?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with Nirupama that, leadership does not have to adhere to a stereotypically masculine template, whether that means aggression, whether that means prioritizing, self over everything else, whether that means the, sort of post rankings or, the typical masculine template of leadership in organizations. To add to that, to me, lead her is also, the first thing that came to my mind is community, which is leading self and also helping each other lead, right? Which is really women supporting women, the very topic that we're talking about today. So to me, lead her also has a very strong element of community in terms of how we are enabling each other as women to move into leadership roles where even today, at least in India, we are severely underrepresented.
Very nice. Thank you, Aparna. And Elaine?
Well, I can see we're going to have a lot of agreement between us three, I think, and this table. And I think that perhaps describes what you were saying earlier, Diva Priya, anyway, about how much support we do give each other. But initially on seeing and hearing the word lead her, like my colleagues here, I'm thinking about leadership, self-leadership, and I'm thinking about the imperative that we have to lead other women. And as I'm now a grandmother of a 6-year-old granddaughter, I'm even more aware of the need for these positive role models of women to women, and particularly younger women coming forward. And I know that's very much the work that you do, Diva Priya, with young entrepreneurs and young female founders starting out.
Yes, absolutely. And I firmly believe that if you can see it, you can be it.
Absolutely.
So we need stronger role models. I think all of us are doing that at our own levels. I hear you when you say that the future leaders are looking at us. I'm bringing up to future women leaders in my own home. So as is Nirupama, I know you've got a young girl, daughter who's I think moved into the world now. So we know, we know where the shoe pinches, we know where the opportunities are, and I think we're at our level, we are doing whatever we can to. So there's a strong, I think, a strong personal commitment towards it as well that we're holding very dear. And at some stage, Nirupama, you can talk about your, it would be interesting to hear about your not-for-profit, where
Yes.
you're helping marginalized girls to do exactly what Elaine just mentioned.
Yes.
So to us, I just want to tell you why, again, when being a branding person, for me, these terms are very important simply because they stand for the purpose that we are trying to create and for the purpose that we are working towards. So for us, when we coined the term lead her, the term encapsulated an intentional and a proactive strategy for advancing female leadership across organizations and the business landscape. So when we talk about women in business, we don't just talk about business owners, women owning businesses, we talk about women impacting businesses as well, so inside of organizations. So for us, what is it that we can intentionally do as an organization to make sure that entrepreneurs as well as executives become leaders? And it is about taking consistent but impactful steps. I mean, I'm not saying we want to do anything grand, but consistently, if we can take impactful steps to foster an environment where women are not only encouraged to lead but also equipped with the necessary resources, the mentorship, and the opportunities to excel. So that's what lead her really means for us, and that's how this whole conversation came into existence, because This roundtable series is an example where we're sharing voices and experiences to collectively spotlight important topics around women's leadership, hoping that the powers that be, the stakeholders that need to hear this, are going to listen in, and future leaders are going to listen to us and get encouraged. So, at Connexus, our mission is clear: to enable women founders and leaders to forge impactful brands, profitable ventures, engaged communities, and purpose driven success. So, we really work at the intersection of purpose and profit. And I know that all three of you do too. We do believe actions speak louder than words. And our commitment lies in delivering tangible results that propel women forward. So not only because it is the right thing to do, but also because advancing women's financial success and leadership is now a business imperative with clear economic outcomes. So, for example, I was doing some reading, and statistics reveal that gender diverse companies, I think it was a McKinsey report that I read. The statistics reveal that gender diverse companies are 15% more likely to outperform their peers, underlining the significance of supporting women in leadership roles. So it's not of course it's a heart centric initiative, but there's a serious business case, and the numbers and the statistics that keep rolling in on a day-to-day basis further substantiate this requirement and the necessity to move on and move the needle forward. So in this context, I would like to ask you, Nirupama, what role do you believe women as catalysts can play for diversity, equity, and inclusion within organizations? And the second part of that question is, how do you support them in this capacity?
Yeah, I think I'm glad to see that there is a remarkable shift in workplaces. I started work 30 years ago, and I worked with a large multinational bank called Citibank, and I was one of the few women at the workplace, and there were very, very few women in senior leadership roles. So we had very few role models. But I'm happy to see that over the last 30 years, it has changed. The world of work has changed to become definitely more diverse. And gender is often the easiest and the first pillar of action for organizations who want to become more diverse. So no complaints. I'm glad that's the starting point at least. So I think when you get more women into the workplace, you are automatically creating more diverse and inclusive workplaces. And I'll share some very interesting anecdote that I heard from a client of mine. So I run leadership programs for organizations because, like you, I believe actions speak louder than words. So we actually run programs that equip and encourage women. These are long-term leadership development journeys. There is coaching. We usually get some leaders to speak as well. So one of the senior leaders in this organization said, we noticed something interesting in branches that had more women. These branches where there were more women were cleaner. They were more aesthetic. They looked better. They actually attracted more customers simply because of these two reasons. And thirdly, the people behaved themselves in these branches. There were fewer fights. There was less shouting. The men in those branches were better behaved than they would be in an all-male branch. And they found that it was not just about aesthetics and color, but there were more customers because the customers found the environment to be more respectful, to be more gracious, to be more hospitable, as well as more inclusive. So they were actually started getting more people into these branches, and that drove a mandate to get more women into the workplace. So that is, of course, at one level that, it actually boosts business as well, because if 50% of your clients are going to be women, it makes a lot of sense to have women in decision-making roles. So I think women play a big role. And when you have women in leadership roles, they can make a significant impact to better the lives of not just the women, but also the men. Right? So by providing better childcare facilities, you take the load of male employees as well. By providing more open, inclusive workspaces, not just for women, you are able to attract other minorities as well. So when women become decision makers, they're able to make some of these changes, which a lot of women leaders are committed to. So that's the first part. Of course, having more women at the workplace is the catalyst for inclusion. The second, this is what I do, both at an individual level as well as through my organization, Growing Leadership of Women. We help organizations at two levels. One, I think it's very important to work with the men. We cannot have more inclusive workspaces by just working with the women. So we look at things like gender sensitization, inclusive leadership. How do you bring some of these qualities which were earlier coded as feminine, like empathy and listening and nurturing, into the workspace? And I'm happy to say, maybe thanks to the pandemic, that there is a shift in what a good leader looks like today than even 15 years ago. So we work to make the environment more inclusive by even educating, enlightening people, doing sessions on unconscious bias, for example. That's at one level. The second is actually working with women to help them understand that a lot of the barriers are often internal and not just external, to coach them and support them in order to live their full leadership potential. And one of the things that would be interesting in this forum is that we help organizations run internal mentoring programs where we pair senior women leaders with junior women. And we provide a structure and a platform to do that, because as you said, if you can see it, you can be it. And we found senior women more than willing to invest their time in coaching and mentoring junior women to come up the ladder. So we actually curate these programs as well. And this is where I'll talk about women supporting women, even through the nonprofit, which is called My Daughter's Precious, where we support the scholarship and mentorship of young women to complete their graduate education. We have senior women who volunteer to mentor these girls. And these could be women from any walk of life. And it's never been a problem getting these women, older women, to support young girls. So I think mentorship and role modeling and providing a structure for that makes a big difference in order to get more women at the workplace and get more women at senior leadership levels.
And there are a lot of nuggets in what you just spoke, Nirupama, about things that you do, about things that are essential, and overall in terms of how there's always a hand that is extended when you ask for help, because it is easy to get mentors. It is, if your purpose is strong, then it is easy to get mentors, and I'm glad that that's your experience. And we have people in the audience resonating, and really agreeing to it. We've got Samantha's from Manchester. She's joined us. She's part of our community. She says that she agrees that male allies are essential, and she's also adding that from working within a multinational, she was working with Siemens in her 20s. It was predominantly male oriented, but the shifts to both genders is notable in this day and age across the board. Still not enough though. Yeah. And going back to the first question where I asked about leader, Vani is I'm just calling out very interesting comments that I'm seeing. To Vani, lead her is honor, empower, and recognize. So she's literally looked at it as an acronym, HER. So honor, empower, and recognize her, which jumps out to her after hearing us share our own takes on it. So it's really, I was telling you earlier also that the comments section has a life of its own, and it's so interesting to see what people are writing and how much they are resonating. So thanks for all of that, Nirup. Yeah, sure. Come in.
It's just I wanted to ask Nirupama a question, because I think the whole issue about mentoring is fascinating, and I just wondered, you were talking about older women mentoring younger women, but perhaps with the corporates, do you ever have a older woman mentoring a young man in an organization?
Yes, of course. In the sense, the mentoring programs we run are structured, in the sense we do want to make it intentionally women supporting women. But many organizations have leadership development programs where there is a senior leader who mentors a junior person, irrespective of gender. But since there are very few women in leadership roles, we may not see it as much as senior men mentoring women, just because of the numbers. But I think anybody in a senior role today takes the responsibility of mentoring very, very seriously, and we do see this happening. The other thing, since you asked that, we also see reverse mentoring, which is an interesting aspect today, because no leader can know everything, especially in the digital world. We see a lot of young people stepping up to share their knowledge, insights, and information with older people, and this is across genders. So those are interesting trends mentoring that.
Yes. Yeah, I was going to bring in the point on reverse mentoring. We had at Connexus, we had a boot camp early last year, where we had, that was based on reverse mentoring, where we got youngsters, young leaders to sort of mentor older women on digital fluency and help them handle certain tools, technology, and that went so well. And even the whole millennial mindset of being more risk averse, being leaning into opportunities, not taking things personally, having a more open mindset. These were some of the things that were talked about, and it was just amazing to see what reverse mentoring can bring to the table. I personally, I have a young team, very lean young team, but I'm always eager to learn from them, and I'm always eager to learn from my daughter who's just started working now. And and even my younger daughter, who's she'll just, she's so good with YouTube shorts, for example, and I tell her, tell me how to do this, tell me how to find trending music for this reel, and she'll say, just give it to me. And like she presses a few buttons and it's there, and she just walks away casually as if she was built to do this. And of course she was born into this. So there is I'm so glad you brought in reverse mentoring, Nirupama. I think the whole thought process when you talk about mentoring is that there should be older, more experienced women mentoring youngsters, but the reverse is truly the case, and it's really worked very well in many cases.
Yeah.
So really glad that you brought it out, and the statistics that you and the examples that you shared highlight the undeniable impact of gender diversity. And yeah, gender diversity is the lowest hanging fruit, so it's easy to talk about it. It's less controversial as well. So a lot of us have used that opportunity to talk about diversity and start there. And from my own experience, I've seen firsthand how women bring unique perspectives and insights to the table, drive innovation, and foster a more inclusive work environment. But it is a fact that to fully harness the potential of female leaders, it's crucial to implement concrete measures, not just discuss, but crucially, crucial to implement concrete measures that support their growth and advancement. And you've touched upon quite a few, Nirupama, so that was interesting. I'm going to ask you, Elaine, amidst growing recognition of the economic benefits of gender equality, which I touched on a little earlier, the spotlight on women-owned businesses has never been brighter. And we're all basking in that. I think we're all benefiting from that. According to a study, again, by that McKinsey report that I was looking at. The report is called The Power of Parity, Advancing Women's Equality. Talks about the US, but I think it's pretty much a global phenomenon. Advancing gender equality could potentially add $12 trillion to the global GDP by 2025. So that's a very solid financial number. Women-owned businesses are already making significant contributions to economic growth. Again, we have several examples. And so, Elaine, against this backdrop, what inspired you to transition from working with corporates to dedicating yourself to supporting female entrepreneurs?
Yes, I mean, it's an interesting question. And I think, in all honesty, I can't say that I reached a crossroads where it was a clear decision to go one way or the other. But it sometimes happens in life. People get attracted to you, and you might not make that deliberate decision of choice, but you find your tribe. And I think that's clearly what was happening to me. Whilst doing a lot of work in corporates in the areas of leadership, very similar to the sort of areas that Nirupama was explaining that she works in leadership development, cultural changing organizations, I found that whilst I was spending quite a lot of time with a number of senior female leaders who wanted that one-to-one coaching and development, and then as I got more involved in the entrepreneurship ecosystem, it was the female founders who came to me and that I worked with. But of course it is a passion because of all of the areas that we've just talked about. Being female ourselves, and perhaps having over the years been on the receiving end of more negative comments and having to fight a bit harder to get our voices heard, you don't want to see that pattern perpetuating itself for too long. And I think with entrepreneurship anyway, the whole area of entrepreneurship, whether it's female founders, male founders, whatever, is a very energizing place to be. And the future of our world depends on the young, and I think it very much depends on our entrepreneurs. The entrepreneurs are the people who make a difference, as you were saying, a very clear, objective, measurable difference to the economies of all of our countries globally. And if women are being held back from contributing and making that financial difference, I mean, that's a huge deficit. And we had in the UK similar figures to the ones you've just quoted, Diva Priya, but in terms of what is the economic impact of more women founders, something called the Rose Report that was started, has been going for a number of years, makes that business case really very clearly. So I still work with corporates, but I would say it's a kind of 80-20 split, and my time mostly with female entrepreneurs, helping them to break through those barriers and succeed for themselves, their families, the community, and the economy.
Thanks, Elaine. I think you've answered my question, and there are compelling reasons for all of us to work with corporates, but also get our energy from serving female founders and helping them get become job creators. So that by itself is a compelling reason. The Rose Report is very insightful, of course. I urge everyone to get their hands on it, and it's available online. Maybe we can find a link and put it in the chat box. But it's got its own insights. Very interesting. And so, moving on, in today's evolving workplaces, everything is changing. Things are so dynamic. Where diversity, inclusion, and adaptability, also as a word, are crucial for success. Women are playing a pivotal role in shaping the landscape in remarkable ways. So my question to Aparna, your dedication to fostering inclusive cultures, challenging stereotypes, and championing equity has been consistent over many years, and I've personally witnessed that even before diversity measures became a mandate for organizations. So I think 2014, 2015 onwards, I've been seeing you actively championing in this space. Given your commitment, I'm curious to hear your perspective on the role of women in shaping modern workplaces, particularly in advocating for flexibility and inclusivity.
Right. Yeah, so at Women's Web, since we are a digital community that's all about enabling women to share their own voices, I think women have been having these conversations about the need for a different model of working that's not premised on the constantly available male worker. I think women have actually been having these conversations long before corporates started having these conversations. And truly that reflects in the many conversations we've had among women at Women's Web, sharing their experiences with other women, whether they've been welcomed at work with such policies, whether they've been forced out of work due to the lack of such policies. Now, coming to women advocating, I think most of us would have heard of the curb cut effect, right? Where curb cuts are typically placed to help, say, wheelchair users, stroller users, and so on, navigate pavements better. And essentially, it's something meant to, make life easier for people with disability. But in that process, it helps a whole lot of other people, including the elderly. Now, I think something very similar plays out in this case when, it is traditionally women who have advocated for more flexibility. But it benefits everybody. And if you look at countries like India, right, we are increasingly, and the West has probably been there before us, and so has China. But we're also in that space now where our aging population is growing very, very rapidly. So while it's largely women who advocate for flexibility, tomorrow it's going to benefit everybody. Say who has a invisible disability, someone who has elder care, and that's regardless of your gender, right? So and why just elder care? Even if you have a pet. Right. So women advocating for more flexibility has actually really made more flexible work, whether that's in terms of work hours or place of work or even work sharing models or whatever may be the nature of that flexibility. I think it's making it more and more a norm. Having said that, a lot of organizations in India are yet to catch on. I would say we're still not there fully, and there is still a lot of anxiety, especially amongst older folks who've grown up in a pre-digital era, about desk time, and how the lack of desk time, for instance, correlates with low productivity. Although there is enough and more research to show that flexible work actually does not impact productivity, as long as you have clearly defined outcomes and metrics to track those outcomes. So yes, on the one hand, women have done a tremendous job in advocating for themselves and having that effect roll out to everybody else. But I'd also like to point out that there's definitely a flip side to this, in the sense that while when women advocate for themselves, often in many organizations where flexibility has not yet been accepted as a real positive, women are actually seen as asking for favors. So until the time that flexibility becomes a norm, what happens is women actually advocate sometimes at enormous cost to their own careers, and this is something that women are constantly having to sort of walk a very very fine line, which can in itself be extremely stressful. Because on the one hand, you want to advocate for yourself, you want to advocate for truly inclusive measures that will make your company better for everybody else, but you may also be doing it in environments which are not very which don't make it very easy for anyone to advocate, for example, in typical top down hierarchical environments. So I think we do need to recognize that sometimes women do this at enormous cost to themselves, and really deserve to be applauded for the work that they've done in widening office cultures to be more inclusive.
Very interesting, Parna. And I'm just wondering, I'm just trying to put a face to, what you've discussed, the situation. Do you have an example of somebody who, who's a very vocal advocate or a very passionate advocate, and maybe she had to face a backlash or some limitation because of the work she did, or I don't know. Any one of you, Elaine, Nirupama, anyone? Can you think of some examples? People in the audience, do you have any example?
No, in fact, I can share an example which I heard just today. And this is, and I'm not going to, of course, name names, but this is about somebody who is both a woman and visually disabled, and who has, been advocating for better, workplace policies, whether it's around time flexibility or, other sort of enablements for people with visual, impairments at the university that she works at. And as many of our audience would also know, universities in India continue to be notoriously, what do you say? I'm hesitant to use the word antiquated, but the fact remains that a lot of universities have not seen real change in terms of their employee policies or so on. So yeah, she has been raising these issues, and she has actually been facing tremendous harassment because these are all seen as the entitlements, not as reasonable accommodations that somebody actually needs to do their job well, and in that process contribute to better outcomes. So somewhere that link between, we spoke about the business case for diversity, right? Somewhere in a lot of places that link is yet to be made. And while I'm giving the example of a university, certainly, the University of Public Sector is not the only place where we have heard of such cases. At Women's Web, we have heard many women write on our platform. For example, there was another case where, somebody repeatedly faced judgments while returning to work after a 3-year gap after maternity, which, if you ask me, is nothing, so long as you're able to stay updated, and nobody should really question your capacity to return to work. But that was one of our very, very viral posts, where she wrote about how she was judged in one interview after another. So certainly, I mean, I'm sorry to sound a little, pessimistic, but I think while the glass is half full, there is also a big, empty that needs to be filled yet.
And that therein lies the opportunity. And I think, we really need to, we need to also recognize these invisible barriers that you mentioned very well. That, when you look at a returning woman, the assumption is that she's coming back after maternity break. But and many of these policies are also designed around that. Women returners are coming back after childbirth or childcare. We actually forget about the fact that it could be a caregiver who's coming back and having lost a parent maybe in the whole caregiving process, and needs some time to heal. So but economic reasons have compelled her to get back.
Forget that again, elder care,
It's
at
like
least
that.
in India, is also still predominantly a woman's job.
Woman's job, absolutely. Caring for a pet is a woman's job. So many beautiful things, lovely nuances you've brought into this conversation, Aparna, and honestly I can resonate with so many of them. Yet when I look around, there is a lot to be done. It is a fact. And Elaine, I don't think it's an India specific issue. I dare say that it's a global issue that we're looking at.
No, it's very interesting because I think over 20 years ago, I was working in my role as a consultant for a not-for-profit organization called Working Families. And so, way back 20 years ago, and we were advocating for flexible working rules and regulations within organizations, and nobody would really listen. It was a really hard struggle. And then when you see what happened during COVID, when people were, and of course technology has moved as well, but now people are expecting more flexible hours when you're working in the workplace. And I think the kind of argument that and the experience that each of us have had of having to really advocate for that flexibility, maybe primarily because we're female. Now, I think more and more people, thankfully, are recognizing that it's just not benefiting the female. It's benefiting all ages, all sexes, to have that more flexible arrangement. And
I just like to add to what Elaine is saying, given that people are all genders, and I'm increasingly seeing this among young people, and I see this as a very positive development. If
Absolutely.
you see that 24-year-olds, 25-year-olds in India, regardless of gender, many of them are saying that, work-life balance, a life outside of work is something that I deserve. And this is regardless of whether I have children or elder care yet, but I still deserve a life outside of work, and I deserve policies that, enable me to have a full life and bring my whole self to work. And I see that as a very, very positive and welcome development, that it's no longer just young women necessarily advocating.
I hear that all the time now. People are talking about the difference in attitude that Gen Z or Gen Z bring to the workplace. Very much as you're saying, Aparna, that kind of, it's about maintaining a healthy lifestyle and a healthy work-life balance is critical and seen as a priority for many young people.
And I can see Nirupama, she's got something to add to the conversation here. Some experience, I think, you recently had, right?
Lots actually, but the world of work was designed by men for men. Right. So what we have today are, I will use Aparna's word, antiquated structures, even at the workplace, not just at universities, because it was designed very specifically for men who didn't have any other role except to be the provider, and their entire identity was very closely tied to work. So you went to work, you did everything, and you came back. But gender roles are changing. The way people are looking at their own identities, are changing. So the world of work has to evolve. And I would say today we use the word accommodation for some of these things that we do, like, flexible working hours or doing something for, differently able people. But I don't think we should look at them as accommodations. These are necessities which create a more inclusive workplace for all, irrespective of gender. So the world of work has to shift and keep pace with the way the Gen Zs are changing, or the way the globe is changing. You have people working across different time zones. So your 9 to 5 doesn't make sense any longer, right? So you have to figure out what is the kind of time you're going to give to the work. And I think it needs to become more holistic, more gender neutral, rather than following the laws. And, for a lot of that has to do with our own biases as well, which we've grown up in a particular way, thinking of particular roles. And I think once we see that shifting, hopefully the world of work and the workplace rules will shift as well.
Yes, and we have Geetika. We're talking about Gen Zs, and Geetika is bringing up. I think she's got some a Gen Z team with her, and she says that I think this generation believes in being more productive in less time, and that's an effective use of one's time. And she goes on to say that so when they spend time on extra activities other than work, they are more productive, and the mindset is better, and they are more resourceful. So it is a fact. I think there is something to be said about how the younger generation is advocating and leading into a better work-life balance, gender agnostic, like Aparna said. And I also want to talk about what Vani is saying about she looks after caregivers. So when we spoke about caregivers, she's saying, yes, caregivers, especially women, struggle to find the support rail, brackets, pun intended, literally, because that is how it is. And I want to, probably at the cost of being a little controversial, but hey, that's what these roundtables are all about. I want to bring in ageism into this mix. It is something which is invisible, in Aparna's words, but is so veiled and is so prevalent that it hits me every time I hear a case around it. So on one hand, I know someone who, after 12 years of being off from work, has just got back to full-time work in her 50s. But then I also hear of so many examples where an older founder is not, her business is not invested in. Investors shy away from older founders. They don't get jobs, because even if they bring in a wealth of experience and expertise. So ageism is something that, again, is a very invisible but a very prevalent threat, I would say, to women coming back to the workforce. And I know that we talk about the 3 M's, which hinder a woman's progress in her career, which is essentially marriage, motherhood, and mobility. So the whole trailing spouse syndrome. And that's the reason why so many women often fall off. But I also want to bring in menopause, which is the 4th M. And so many women either don't ever make it back to work because she's battling with the 4th M, or having reached the glass ceiling, she cannot shatter it because she just doesn't have it in her physically or emotionally to battle what it takes and yet hold the top job. So I don't know your perspectives around it, maybe very quickly, because time flies when you're having a good conversation, and that's the same happening here. But anything you would like to add?
I want to say, I did a lot of research on this. For my last book was called Powerful. The woman, it's Indian women, but I think it's Global Women's Guide to Unlocking Her Potential. So I actually met and spoke to a lot of women, and it's amazing to see how many biases are there. Of course, one from the external world, but from women themselves who believe that after a particular age, their roles have completely shifted. They're not good for anything. And at least in India, we have this image of an older woman as somebody who should spend her life in spiritual activities and pursuit of certain things, not care for herself, sacrifice. And if you stop being a mother, now, fulfill your duties as a grandmother and look after your children's children. So there is a huge shift. I do see a shift in how we are viewing older women, but these biases are very deeply entrenched, to the extent that crossing a particular age actually puts a barrier in terms of what women can do, not just can do, but should do or should not do. I think the shoulds that a society imposes on women, and I would say not just after a particular age, but across her life, do become these barriers. So we know that if you're a particular age, you need to get married. And I have hiring managers who actually say, I hesitate to hire. I shouldn't, but I do hesitate to hire women between 25 and 30 because, I think they are flight risks. I know I shouldn't ask this question, but that's the age we're supposed to get married. And then you're supposed to have children at a particular stage. And then after all that is done, you're supposed to sit back and, devote your time to certain other activities. So that becomes a big barrier for women to come back and start in many ways their third chapter or their second chapter. And, along with that's the time they need more of self-care. But we have stigmatized self-care for women to the extent that it's equal to selfish, not self-care. But older women do need to take care of themselves in many ways, especially with menopause. So I think a lot of biases which are there both externally, and this is what we call internalized patriarchy, actually makes it difficult. And I know women who actually tell me, I want to get back to work, but I'm too old. I'm too old to learn anything. But there are those who've broken. So I can tell you, I did my first run, 10-kilometer run after I turned 50. I did my first trek after I turned 50 because I wanted to break those barriers in my own mind, not for the rest of the world, but to say, hey, you're still healthy. You can still do more things. In fact, my work has significantly ramped up after my daughter has gone to college and started working, because you have this entire space that you've created now, which is empty, and I would say not empty, but you have space which you can fill up with doing so many different things. But we have to break the barriers in our own mind first, is what I feel about this.
I think the issue that we talked about earlier about role models for younger women holds true here too. And I know in the UK, the fourth M is a huge topic at the moment in corporates, in organizations, but in the media as well. And there's some really quite well-known names who are stepping forward and talking about the issue and saying this is something that has to be discussed in the workplace and those provisions made. So I'm very glad that the debate is being aired, and again, more high-profile role models for this fourth M, I think, is going to help us all anyway too.
No,
and we need to have many more conversations in the Indian workplaces around this, and in Indian families, because we don't talk about it enough. So that's why I thought I'll just throw it into the conversation. I'm sure we can contribute to it. Sorry, Aparna, were you saying something?
Yeah, no, I was just saying that that's what Nirupama was saying about how we've equated self-care to selfish. And that's so true, because we are a culture that venerates age, actually. So it's a little surprising when you hear that, okay, there is also ageism here. But the reality is that we venerate age in a certain way. When it conforms to a certain template, which is, traditionally caring for family, selfless, sacrificial, and so on. So I think we're still as a society, we're in a very, very transitionary stage where elders of any kind, be it men or women, and more so women, are still expected to, fit that traditional template. And men, of course, have, for long been accepted for pursuing the aggressive, C-suite careers and so on. And that's still something new for women, so which is why, like, if you read Indra Nooyi's book, there is a lot about this, for example, that even somebody who was as successful as she was still sort of had to justify it, the ambition to reach the C-suite. So when, everybody around you doesn't make it really, okay for you, whether it's your workplace or your family, then there does come a question that as a woman, how long do you keep struggling against the tide? So no doubt, at some point of time, there are many women who tell themselves that it's okay, I've achieved enough, let me step back. And that's just human, right?
Yeah, it is, absolutely. And Nirupama, a couple of times you mentioned the term unconscious bias, and many of these things that we've discussed right now are implicit unconscious biases, stereotypes. And I had this in mind. I wanted to ask you, how do you address unconscious bias and systemic barriers to women's advancement through your coaching and facilitation process? Is there something that, very quickly in a nutshell, you can explain?
So I think coaching per se is about uncovering your own, we will call them limiting beliefs, which are also biases. And I think the biggest shift happens when we are able to explore that. So a lot of work is, I would say, both coaching and facilitation is at the mindset level and then the skill set level. I always believe there's no point giving skills to people if you have a barrier in your mindset. So I'll give you an example. So I do a lot of workshops on networking. So I would admit that it's a bit of a barrier for me as well. But we can give you skills, tools, take and tell you, please attend. But if you have a deep set limiting belief that networking and talking about your achievements is not the right thing for women, you're never going to be able to use those skills and tools. So I'll say one is the coaching process, which we uncover some of these limiting beliefs. And I'm very happy to share one of the things that I've done is create a psychometric assessment specifically for women in their language using archetypes to counter stereotypes. So I actually call it the 6 feminine powers, where there is the good girl, the warrior, the noble queen, the wise seeker, the charming influencer, the nurturing caregiver. We are seeing these as sources of power, not as stereotypes and power blocks. So now I have a team of people who are certified to use the tool, and I've seen amazing resonance because when women are suddenly aware that, hey, these are the beliefs, these are the biases that I'm holding. For example, you can't look attractive and be taken seriously at the same time. It's a very interesting one that a lot of women face. I faced it when I was a young trainer. Or, self-care is selfish. Or if I will be accepted only if I do things for other people. Or, raising my voice against authority is disrespectful. Because we've been indoctrinated for thousands of years on these gender normed messages that we ourselves don't become aware of it. So I found an assessment tool is very useful in coaching conversations because suddenly you say, hey, these could be limiting beliefs that I am holding, which are coming in the way. For example, ambition is a bad thing for women. And at least, when you study, and I studied a lot of Indian mythology and scriptures, it's very blatantly said women should not be self-serving and self-seeking. So when you hold these biases and you're not aware of them, they unconsciously become blocks to your own power and potential. And coaching becomes a way of uncovering this so that you can take the necessary actions from a place of self-awareness. I always say women don't need a third person to come and empower you. You can put all the policies and the laws that you want, but if you're not willing to empower yourself, then there's no point having these great policies, tools, and networks. And I think self-awareness is truly the path to self-empowerment, and coaching and facilitation. When I say facilitation, it's group work. When we do leadership workshops, we actually enable women to go and uncover these because we've seen women don't need new skills. They're as good as men or anybody else in strategic thinking, financial acumen, whatever skills the business needs. They're really good at that. But what we really need to work on as we handle systemic barriers is our own beliefs. And, a power structure is not going to change overnight. We're having elections now in India, and, nobody wants to give up power. Those who want power are going to hold on to it by hook or crook. But so who can make the change to a system that is based on, giving power to a particular gender? Hopefully a few male allies, but it's up to women. We need to break our own biases and then raise our voice and break some of those structures. So a lot of the work we do is actually helping women. And of course, I do coach men as well. So I do coach a lot of men, is to uncover these limiting beliefs. I also use something called shadow beliefs, which are fascinating, so that you can move on to take control of your own lives. So this is a fascinating subject, and I will go on and on about it.
No, it sounds absolutely fascinating, and I think we'll have to ask you to come back and do like a masterclass on probably just this. I'm sure, because I can see Sam saying this. The sound of this tool sounds amazing, and it does. So we want a longer conversation with you, Nirupama, on this.
Count me in for that workshop. So.
Yes, the reason I want to organize it because I also want to learn. I think Elaine has raised her hand, so good. Aparna Tripathi in the background, please make a note of this. So we will do this.
Thank you. And that's it's a part of my vision to take this work to thousands of women, because I've seen the power of self-awareness to self-empowerment. Thank you for that.
And we are going to be one of the vehicles that is going to make this happen with you, Nirupama. So Aparna, Nirupama spoke about networking and often for women it's a barrier. It's not something that's, it's sometimes it's out of your comfort zone essentially. At the same time, one trend that seems to be gaining momentum is the rise of virtual communities and online platforms tailored specifically for women, and there are so many these days. So looking ahead, what developments do you foresee shaping the future of women's communities, and how do you plan to adapt and innovate in response to these changes?
Right.
Do you have any thoughts around?
Yeah, so I mean, no, this is a very rapidly evolving space, and definitely, the way technology has enabled communities to come together is fascinating. I think some of the important developments, that are going to happen are in terms of how do you. So one thing is, sometimes there is actually a problem of plenty. In fact, I would say that we are probably the OG community in India as far as women's digital platforms are concerned. But today, some would argue that there are actually possibly too many. So then the question really comes that what is it that you're offering? So somewhere today the ease of virtual connection, right, is something we can take for granted. So the technology to build a community now exists very, very easily, and the entry bar is very, very low compared to when we had begun. So today, I think what is increasingly going to differentiate communities, right, is the authenticity and specificity that you bring in. And let me just, talk a little bit about that. So authenticity in terms of what are the nature of connections that you're enabling, and how are you really enabling women to be themselves in a very safe space. And this has, been something that people have always spoken about for us at Women's Web, that if you ask people that why do you value Women's Web, it's a safe space where I can share my voice. So basically being themselves in a very, very safe way where, they're not, they're supported and they're not really exposed to, say, trolling or malicious actors. So that's one in terms of authenticity. Second thing is specificity. Increasingly, I'm seeing a lot of communities that enable very specific kinds of people to connect with each other, around, and they need not exist across time. They could even come together for a very specific purpose. So, for example, that's, like Devapriya, that could be a cohort that you organize, right? And people might continue to stay connected for specific reasons, but there's a very, very, specific time-bound purpose maybe around which they come together. And then maybe they fulfill that purpose and they could move on, or they could stay connected as they like. So these are some very, very interesting trends that I'm seeing. And I see technology as definitely an enabler, but I don't see technology as the sort of only reason, to be part of the community, because today you can take that for granted.
Yeah. And I like the way Geetika's sorry, Elaine, you're saying something?
I was just agreeing about those changes that are happening with the community, and Devapriya, that one of the things that I've been working on for the last 6 months is a online time-bound community for female founders, particularly specifically as they journey from founder to leader, because there's a whole raft of changes that happen as you and your business grow in that way. And I think that as you were emphasizing, Aparna, I think it is, you can't just rely on the technology. People have to make that connection with the facilitators of the program at an emotional level, and at a level of where you feel that you've built up a level of trust. And I could also talk about this for a while now, where we're over time, but that's where we are with this.
So yes, we are over time, and it's amazing and very fascinating as to how time flies when you're having a good conversation. So I'm going to ask Elaine, I'm going to ask you one quick question. So feel free to respond as succinctly as possible. I want to bring the whole funding conversation into the mix right now and ask you. I've been pondering about how can we ensure that female founders get a fair shake at funding opportunities. What do you think? What strategies do you believe are crucial? I know this again can be a long conversation, but maybe your top 2 or 3 thoughts around what do you believe are crucial in to leveling the playing field for female founders to attract funding?
It's a huge topic, and I'm aware of the time. I'll bring in the words that we've talked about a lot, is unconscious bias, and that exists a lot when it comes to men who have the finances as VCs or angels in terms of investing in women. Therefore, I think one of the biggest forces for change in this area are more female angel groups, female VC funds who will support women. And the other area, back to where you started, where you were saying, that you hear women are their own worst enemies. And I think that's not the case in terms of supporting each other, but maybe it is the case in where we put other people first. And again, there's lots of research about this. When we're in negotiations, we can negotiate more. We can be stronger advocates for other people than we can be for ourselves. And so I think, it's all about the context and the balance. And but more female founders themselves, funders, as well as founders, will make a big difference.
I sense another separate session on just this topic coming up. So out of this one conversation, we've carved out two already. And I'm sure Aparna is going to be able to conduct one on communities as well. So we've got three sub-sessions that have emerged from this. So that was a fabulous conversation and an excellent participation from the audience as well. And I'm just going to quickly try and sum it up and bring in certain threads that have sort of been established. And basically, creative, inclusive environments where women can thrive requires a multifaceted approach, as we've all spoken about and we've heard one another. It starts with fostering a culture of respect. So a lot of the mindset things, Nirupama, you spoke about, respect and belonging, where diversity is not just tolerated, but celebrated. And really, amen to that. May we reach a state where diversity is not just, a tick in the box, but a celebration. And this does mean actively listening to the voices of women and other underrepresented groups and ensuring that their perspectives are valued and included in decision-making processes. So this is where, again, the whole lead her perspective comes in. Businesses can invest in leadership development and career advancement opportunities, yet at the same time, including mentorship, things like sponsorship programs, training, networking opportunities. These are things that definitely need to be thought about, less words, more deeds. And additionally, it's important for businesses to address systemic barriers, like, all of you, Aparna, Nirupama, Elaine, you spoke about systemic barriers, visible and invisible, that disproportionately affect women. And therefore, ultimately, fostering inclusive environments for women requires a commitment, consistency, and a pledge in a way, rather than just saying that I have a diversity agenda and I need to fulfill it. So let's hope we're headed in that direction. And as we wrap up today's Leader Roundtable, I again want to thank our amazing panelists, Nirupama, Elaine, and Aparna, for sharing your experiences and your wisdom with us. Thank you to all our viewers for joining us as we work towards a more equitable and inclusive future for all. Until next time, let's keep the momentum going and continue to be lead hers and to lead her. Thank you very much, and have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.